Guten Tag, and welcome to another quality content module freshly ground by Small Beans, where ideas are always percolating. If you enjoy this pod, please consider joining our community over at patreon.com/smallbeans, where only $3 a month gets you access to double the content, including Patreon-exclusive series like Spiel Boys and Star Trek: The Next Futurama, plus bonus episodes of your SB favorites. Much love, and enjoy the thing. Hello, and welcome back to Tales from the Pit. I'm your intrepid host, Michael Swaim, and this is your trigger warning. In today's episode, my guest Vanessa Guerrero and I discuss our worst days ever, a conversation that touches on depression, anxiety, heartbreak, PTSD, self-loathing, and suicide. On the bright side, we also talk about how to deal with those things. We don't just say sad stuff and then roll credits. We're not Darren Aronofsky. But before the interview, a new short story. Inspired by my favorite author Harlan Ellison, I've decided to do away with any mystery and explain it up front. This story is about parts work and about learning to be kind to yourself in the midst of great suffering, not by resisting your inner abuser, but by sitting with it, being present with it, and ultimately taming it. The monk is you, the child is hope, the robber is your self-loathing, and the seasons are the seasons. They pass in glory whether we bear witness or not. This story is called Two Graves. Someone dies in it. Once, long ago, very near here, a monk and her child lived by a quick-moving stream among fields of wildflower. The hills there browned, frosted, budded, and bloomed season by season. The river flowed on to a faraway place where it became the ocean. The hills flowed on to a faraway place where they became mountains that stood flat against the horizon. The child also grew, and the wise monk taught him everything she knew. She hoped not only to teach him to accept his life as it came to him, but in some way to become a part of him and to flow on herself, to become the ocean. I call her Monk because she grew her own melons, gourds, and tomatoes, and greeted the sunrise with humility, and learned what she could from her miseries, and worked many years to master her own thoughts and emotions, even though no one told her to. No one ordained her. No one needed to. Soon, the child was a young man, and began to roam further and further from home. Do not ask me how he came to be thus. The pebble is carried by the stream, and the stream moves quickly. The child was roving, chasing the sun over a frosted hilltop, when a desperate man attacked and killed him. The man was hoping to steal food or money from the boy, but he carried neither. Later, by sheer chance, this robber came upon the monk's house, not knowing it was the young man's as well, and begged for food at the door, and was invited in for dinner. Smoke rose from the chimney as they shared a meal from the monk's garden. Steam rose too from the young man's wounds, and from his mouth as he focused on his breathing as his mother had taught him. Then it stopped. He became awash, a stream run to ground, running red, running backwards. As when any young person dies, he became a delta. Something had been split, and now things would take a different course. Two streams flowing together became two apart, never to converge again until both reached the sea. The monk found her child at sunrise. She followed crisp tracks in the snow upstream from her doorstep to where her son had been killed. After some untracked length of time, she washed his body in the stream, dug a grave behind their home, and laid him to rest with a simple prayer. Then she packed food, water, and other things in a cloth, dressed herself warmly, shuttered the windows, and traveled to the nearest village to ask about the desperate man. It didn't take long to find him. He was a drunken boaster, doing odd jobs in the very same village and sleeping in hay behind his stables. The monk found him there, insensible, and tied his hands and feet together. Then she slung him over a horse and, leaving money behind in exchange, rode them both to her home. The man awoke and cried for help, but by then they were far beyond the lights of the village. The monk tied the man to a kitchen chair set next to a small window that overlooked her child's grave. She gagged him so that he could not speak. When she unbound his mouth to feed him, he cursed her, threatened her, begged her, reasoned with her. He tried to use the only thing at his disposal to get free again. She never spoke to him at these times, or acknowledged his moaning. Once a day, the monk unbound his feet and walked him around the outside of the house on a long rope leash. Several times a day, she unbound his arms while his legs remained tied so that he could stretch. A few times a week, she sang to him, recited a parable, or told him a story. All of these were to prevent atrophy. Otherwise, the monk accepted her life as it came to her. Her heart still beat, but never again to the same rhythm. The hills budded. She gave in to grief, let the undertow consume her, and became only emotion, a throbbing wound. The hills bloomed. She screamed on her knees until she had no voice left. The hills browned. She lay on her side staring at the wall, nothing in her mind but static. The hills frosted. She became delirious and set 2 places for dinner, spoke to a child that was no longer there, asked him about his day. The garden withered. The monk no longer grew tomatoes, but instead rode to the village to buy food. It didn't cost much, and she had the money. The desperate man who had killed her son beheld the shape of her loss for a full year. He listened to stories about the person whose life he had ended. He wore the young man's clothes. In time, his denial became guilt, and his guilt became genuine grief. The man found that he missed someone he'd never met. Tears fell silently down his face all day long. He moaned all night while nightmares took him, visions of eternal torment for what he had done, or the look on the young man's face as the knife went in. Such a change certainly wouldn't occur in everyone, or by the same means, but it did to this person. That's what makes this story. And so, the man changed. Some would call it brainwashing, or learned helplessness, or Stockholm Syndrome. Perhaps it would be in real life. At the end of the story, the monk unties the man one morning, but he remains very still for a long time. Finally, he rises and finds the monk in the backyard digging a second grave next to the one where her son lay. Weeping, the man says, "I understand. I accept your judgment, and if it will bring you peace, I will gladly lie in this hole and cut my belly open." "You misunderstand," says the monk. "The grave is for the part of you that killed my son. That part is dead now, if you wish it to be. Will you bury it with me?" Together, they fill the hole in again with fresh soil, and the monk says a simple prayer over the grave of her child and over the grave of her enemy, whom she has destroyed utterly. "Now please leave and never return here," says the monk. "When I look at you, I can only see what you stole, and neither of us deserves that." The man leaves without another word, and spends the rest of his days helping people, or else falls into his old ways and kills another, or else unwinds completely and is lost in the stream. It doesn't matter to the monk. That's not the important part. Oh dear spelunker, because the metaphor is that we're in a pit. I recall the very first time, it was on the cusp between 5th and 6th grade, that I became aware that instead of just spelling book homework, every night we were going to now have spelling and vocab homework, which is a whole separate red book instead of the blue book. And I clearly remember saying to my mom, "This is probably going to be the worst day of my life. Like today is probably, it's at least this is the nadir." I probably didn't use that word at the time of it can only go up from here. Anyway, now I'm 37. Welcome to Tales from the Pit. This episode is on the theme of worst day ever. I've had a very much worst day ever, which I might describe in a nutshell if it feels appropriate, but I'm not really here to talk about my worst day ever. But sort of like this resonated so hard with me that's why I reached out to my good friend Vanessa Guerrero. Vanessa, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm sorry. Yeah.
let's get into it.
Well, I'll do the standard, not caveat, but like I think it needs to be said. It means a lot, so much to me personally, that my friends are willing to come on this show and talk about things that people normally, not comedians as much. But your average schmo might be embarrassed to talk about.
Yeah.
And all I can say is every time we release one of these, I get a lot of feedback from listeners that it's really helpful to know that you're not in this alone. And especially when you happen to hear, some segment of the people listening will be like, whoa, that's uncannily like my situation. It can really be helpful to make you not feel isolated. So thank you on behalf of the listeners. And we're going to do this AA style, I think. So that means like where you were, what you've been doing, and how it's working out now. So where you were, give us a story, man. Set the stage. What's been going on with you lately?
Where I was, in terms of where I was for the worst day ever. I was at home. We had just gotten back from arguing over sushi and hot dogs, and my partner let me know that she didn't think that our marriage was sustainable, which I thought was a hard left turn for that. But clearly she'd been thinking about it for some time. And then I had already been dealing pretty intensely with some ideation stuff, and I had made like an attempt that I didn't tell anyone about. So when she told me that, I proceeded to have the worst disassociative episode of my entire life. Like just a complete and utter brain go shut down episode where I just shattered.
Yeah, go ahead. So it's my job to do this. But like, so what is that like for you? Or I mean, I'm just picking up what you're putting down as gently as I can, but like starting with the dissociation, because I have my own episodes, or anyone with mental challenges has like their expression. What does dissociating feel like for you? Is that, or do you mean like an out of body experience in some sense?
In some sense, I have pretty intense PTSD, and so I went straight into like, I guess this is a fighter. It wasn't a fight or flight situation, but my body was like, I guess this is a fight or flight situation, and I'm gonna treat this like fight.
Yeah.
And it I don't know how better to put it than like I basically felt like I was feral. I
Yeah.
I just completely started reacting like this was a situation in which it was like fight or defend, in which it wasn't. And then the issues that I'd been having with ideation just came to like a full head, and I actually ended up making an attempt again. So it was my second attempt in that week, and I
And were you saying, and you hadn't shared? Well, there had been an attempt, so I assume she knew
she didn't know.
that this was particularly bad timing,
No,
or she
didn't
didn't
know.
have a way of knowing
She
that
didn't
per
have a way
se.
of knowing because I made
Yeah,
an
that's
attempt.
just fucking. I mean, that's what makes it the worst day ever. But terrible timing, terrible luck.
Absolute
Yeah.
terrible timing and terrible luck. She didn't know, and I didn't tell anyone, and I hadn't planned to tell anyone because it was just the first initial attempt was literally just like Call of the Void. I didn't really like plan on it. It wasn't something that I was setting out to do. It was more like an opportunity had like presented itself that day, and I like found myself just meeting that opportunity, and then at the last second being like, oh, what am I doing? And it had frightened me so much so that I was like, maybe if I don't tell anyone, then this never really happened, which is
We'll slide back to
well,
normal, and that will just be like a weird thing that
exactly
happened.
like I'll
Yeah.
backslide back into whatever normal looks like, and that'll just be like a weird thing that happened. And then I obviously was behaving very irrationally that entire weekend, because I had just made an attempt, but she couldn't have known. She just saw irrational behavior and broke up with me, and I lost my mind. Um,
Yeah.
and I made another attempt that time, and I proceeded to self harm. And it was absolutely the worst goddamn day of my entire life, without question.
Yeah.
Because she and I had very much built a life together, and I also realized how much, I don't want to say pretending because that's wrong to say that she was pretending. I don't know what her mindset was, but how much I realized she had been going along with some plans that we had together, because I had no idea. It was completely out of left field how much we weren't seeing things the same way. Like,
You had no idea you were even close to that
I had no
point, or
idea. I had absolutely no
yeah.
idea we were even
Okay.
close to that point. I had no idea that she changed her mind about kids. I had absolutely no
Mm-hmm.
idea. And that was jarring on its own because she'd always seemed very honest and communicative. If anything, it felt like there were certain things, and especially like things about herself, that she was like maybe playing close to the chest. I didn't know that that was one of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you're hungover right now,
I'm
right?
currently hungover.
Yeah. Go. Okay. Good. That's per. I just want the audience to know because I think we said that
It's
off mic.
important that everybody knows that I'm currently hungover and nursing a bottle of water.
That's right. Um. Yeah. Well, and we're not here obviously to dish on them, but just to resonate a little bit. And you know, I don't hope this is helpful. Don't know if it will be, but because every situation's unique, right?
Yeah.
And you may get to a place where you're grateful for the relationship, or don't think about the relationship, or glad at any, you know, anything in between. But I definitely, on the day I realized my first marriage was falling apart, said like, you're killing our children, our future children, and stuff, and self harmed and all this stuff. And now I'm so glad not to be, not only so glad not to be in that marriage, but also never think about it ever. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Like, I remember it and go, oh, that's weird, man. Glad I got out of there. And there was a lot of pretending involved. So not to compare and say our situations are the same, but you know, they're humans have patterns, and there's a lot of us, so we do iterate on the things that happen to us. Um, to so I know I phrased it as worst day ever, but all right, we're gonna get to like the healing part, you guys. We
We'll get
really
there.
will. But we got to synopsize. So I also want to bring up, you also lost your job,
I lost my
right,
job at
around
the
this
same
time.
time.
Oh, and I have to say in the same breath, I notoriously I like laugh when things are bleak and
Oh, so
dark.
do I.
So I'm not laughing at your pain. Yeah, I'm like laughing about like, oh, life is hard. You just got to laugh. Okay,
Where it
so
was
what happened
so
with
much at
that?
once.
Yeah, and how close were those events?
Within 2 weeks of each other.
Okay.
So we break up. I absolutely lose my mind. And in terms of like where I am, I'm still in the place of like, I wish it never happened and I wish we were still together, but that's maybe part of the dumpy. And
And that might be the truth of your journey, or like, I'm not here to say
it
where you should land.
absolutely
Yeah.
is. 'Cause it was great while it was there, but I
Mm.
just, clearly there were a lot of things that I didn't understand. And right after the breakup and then trying to figure out, Jesus, we just bought a house. How am I how am I going to maintain this on my own? Within 2 weeks I lost like, not only like the dream job I was working for, but the dream job that had also like turned into a little bit of ash in my mouth, which definitely didn't help with like
Hmm.
some of the mental health stuff leading up to it, because like it was a schedule that was like killing me. I wasn't sleeping enough, and it was absolutely causing me to disassociate like every other day. And I couldn't breathe wrong without some like alt-right weirdo on the internet talking about how the woke left is ruining their gaming media. And so I was also
Wow.
getting people
Yeah.
like that had gotten my phone number saying weird shit to me. Um and
Mm-hmm.
so it was like it was such a bittersweet ending where it was like I love this job and I poured my heart and soul into it, but also like several elements of it are fucking killing me. And now I have a house.
But that didn't mean I wanted it to dissolve per
Yeah, I didn't
se.
want it to
Yeah. It's
dissolve like this.
complex.
It was a very complicated situation. And so all of that combined with the fact that what am I going to do with a mortgage on my own? And then I just lose my job.
Yeah.
And I just put all of the money that I was going to spend into taking my wife and I on an anniversary trip because all of this happened right around our anniversary. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
I had to take all of that anniversary money and put it into, I have to check myself into a mental health facility money.
Yeah. Super glad that you're doing that or like getting that trip. Well, I hope it works
It
because
works. It works really well.
I super want to encourage people, of course, to seek help in counseling and therapy and mood meds if that's appropriate for the situation. But I also want people to be aware. And I don't, if you're in a state of despair, I hope, or like, I really don't want this to keep you in that state of despair, but like, there is a journey to it, right? Not every therapist is good.
No.
Mood meds sometimes don't work, and you have to try several. And it can be long. And especially, I mean, we're coming to you from America, land of the fucked healthcare system. That includes mental health
Yeah.
care. It is hard to like navigate the system and get it
It's
done.
expensive and
But
hard to
help
find.
exists, and if you're down for the journey, and in times like if you're like me and I we are uncannily I'm sorry, leading parallel lives in a weird way, only in the sense that at Cracked I always thought, we'd say, oh, everyone's a heckler, and now with the internet these kids are even meaner because it's anonymous and it detaches you, blah blah blah. And then I worked for IGN, so like around the same time you and I both moved into like the
Yeah.
gaming sector, and I had not seen nothing. Gamers are fucking toxic and
Th-
vile. Like gamers are the scum of
It's
the earth. The
poison.
ones who are like
The
that.
ones who
And
are
if you're
like
not
that.
like that, I'm not talking
No.
about you. You know what I
If I didn't call for you,
mean.
don't come. I'm not talking about you if this
Right.
ain't you, but if this is you, oh my God,
You're a
you're a
piece of
piece of
shit.
shit. It was unlike anything that I dealt with in my entire life. Like I'm literally dealing with feelings of like ideation. My wife just left me. My job is ended, and I'm getting text messages to my phone number that's just like kill yourself, you fat cow. And so I was like, I
We had to hire a security guard whose only job was to escort like our beautiful on camera host woman to their car and
Jesus.
back.
But also that
Yeah.
makes sense
Yeah.
because I
Well, because there are people constantly writing in saying, no, 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 I'm gonna find you. Here's your address. This is actionable, and they probably actually aren't going to do that, but they know that's scarier. And legally speaking, once they say that, like the company has to take steps because they have your address and shit.
exactly.
Yeah.
And
Well, yeah.
I had
Okay.
to
Too much of a tangent though.
no, I
Go ahead,
appreciate it.
please.
I had to therapist shop around that time because also a lot of therapists were like,
Yeah.
I don't really know what to do with the doxing. Um, and because I
Hmm.
was like, how do how do we take like the cyberbullying element of this and do it? Um, and I actually at one point called the suicide hotline in between looking for
Hmm.
therapists because I also got rejected by a few that were like, you should definitely be checked in somewhere, but maybe like things are a little bit too intense for us to start one on one. So it like took me a while.
Just like talk
Yeah, it, like
therapy.
took me a
Yeah.
while to find a talk therapist that was like willing to take my case on. So I called the suicide hotline in between just to like have someone to talk to like hold me over like a particularly bad day in all of this. And I was describing this situation with like my marriage, and then I was describing the situation with my job, and then I was describing the unique situations that were happening with my job, and the hotline worker was like, "Oh, I think I know where you work."
Oh,
And I was like, "This is the last thing I
big
want to
fan, by
hear.
the
This
way.
is the
Also,
absolute last
yeah.
goddamn thing I want to hear." Um,
Don't kill yourself. Big fan, by the
yeah,
way.
go kill yourself. Big fan of your work. And I was like, "All right, thank you, but I would have loved it if you just pretended not to know. Um, uh,
That's what I mean about bad counselors, though. Or not that that was bad, but we had a couples counselor who was in Beverly Hills or whatever and would constantly go like, I treated Tom Waits today. And we're like, I don't think you're supposed to do
you're not supposed to
that.
say it.
Yeah, it's super weird.
Oh my god, that's so funny.
Get help, Tom Waits. We're rooting for you, man.
I'm, I'm happy for you, Tom
Well,
Waits.
yeah. So you said it did work. So let's move into the. I feel like we've already naturally kind of gone there, but the what you did about it phase. Um, so there's a lot of different. Uh, I actually didn't mean to announce this on this episode, and I don't really know when it will come out, but I'll do a separate episode digging into the details. But it's just so weirdly samey that it has to be mentioned. I was also on Suicide Watch recently, and they were hiding the knives and stuff and having psych checks every day and stuff like
Mm.
that. And I'm also gonna lose some money right now in a similar fashion to go be in a nice place and talk to some kind people. Um, Not for particular reasons, like I didn't have a story like you, but just a multitude of
Yeah.
factors. Similar stuff, and I bring it up only because I really want to compare my experience to yours, but I was shocked about this. Uh, I told people in my life, the human beings I know, like, oh, I'm in nervous breakdown, like suicidal, obsessive thoughts of like stuff rotting and like you should kill yourself and
Yeah.
shit. Point. I can't control my own actions or like and something needs to be done. And I always really imagined that it was like in a show where you do that and they're like, please sir, this way, and you go to a hospital immediately and they're like, you've been 5150, now everyone's going to take care of you / leave you alone, or like you can have some quiet time or whatever you need. Dude, I have encountered, if anything, extra paperwork and hoops to jump through to prove that I'm crazy enough
Yes.
to go to this place, and there's a waiting list. They're like, well, hang on for like 2 to 3 weeks and we'll get you in here. And I'm like, you do this to people who are like, I'm on the verge of killing myself? And they're like, unfortunately, there's a lot of you fucks. So yeah, there's like a list. You can't get in right away. You can't just walk in. So what's your experience been like?
I definitely had a similar experience in that I was like, hey, I've like tried several times. I've tried several times and I've like um just gonna give like a slightly gonna give a little bit of a trigger warning to anybody listening. I've tried several times and like my methods are also getting like more and more intense. Um
Mm-hmm.
and more like aggressive and harmful, and clearly like something's escalating and I like cannot control my actions. And they were like, yeah, well, there's still a waiting list for these things, and it is harder to get into than like a fancy reservation for some hot new restaurant, except in this case
Right.
it's just like a bed where I can like go and talk about childhood trauma.
To try and survive another couple
And
months. Yeah.
so I basically had to like stack up every single kind of like auxiliary support I could just to uh get me by until I was able to check into one of these facilities. I went to like every open support group that there was.
Mm-hmm.
I looked up every support group in my area for like trauma, grief, self harm, you name it. And
You're like Sex Addicts Anonymous, and you're like, I just want
I
to
just
talk. I just
I
need
just need a
someone to
hug.
talk to.
I just need someone to talk to
Yeah.
me. I went to like every support group that I could possibly go to. Every hotline you could think of, I called it. And then because I've been 5150 before and it didn't go as well for me and I wanted to have like a little bit of autonomy in the situation, I basically put myself on like friends and family watch. And I would have either my mom primarily, or like friends come to like relieve her of their time to like stay with me. um and
Yeah.
some of them would like give me the privacy to like just like quietly cry in my room while they were like in the next room. Some of them were like, let's go door open.
Rifling through your shit.
And I rifling through my shit, and I'd have to explain the nature of you being here means I'm not gonna try right now. I uh
Mm-hmm.
like obviously my like previous attempts were like a little bit more public. But I was in a place at that point where I was like, if you're here, I'm not gonna try. Just because I'm like, I'm not saying I'm sane, but I'm like a little bit more stable than my complete and utter disassociation at this point. Uh, to
Yeah.
not want to like have a witness. And it took me like,
Your thoughts are bigger when you're alone, which is why it's a super good advice to, as soon as you feel able, have some kind of connection with another human being. But man, you don't feel like it at the
oh my
moment.
God, I know.
It's like so hard to force yourself.
I had a friend who, God bless her, she kept trying to like talk to me, and I didn't have
Mm-hmm.
talking energy at all.
Yeah.
And she very much wanted me to talk through it. And I don't know how to advocate for myself sometimes when I'm that way. And I didn't know how to say, like, hey, I don't have
Mm-hmm.
talking energy. I'm using up like a lot of mental energy that I'm basically using to like maintain and not harm myself into like maintaining this conversation. And
Yeah.
so without realizing it, she kind of talked me into a panic attack, and I was sitting on the floor and I was like, just get me ice, please just get me ice, that I would like rub on my neck to try and like keep myself present. Um, and it was around that point that I was like, I have to figure out how to say, I can't do this right now. I can't function in the way that you're hoping that I function right now. I can't even, like, a pep talk is debilitating to me right now. Um, and there was definitely like an element of like trial by fire, cuz I
You could just text "I love you," and you're like, it's good to verify. It might be a lifeline that I know that someone loves me, but like I can't answer any questions. Don't.
yeah.
Sorry, I'm going through this right now, and yeah, I'll have phone calls where towards the end I feel like I'm drowning, and I don't tell them, and then the second I hang up, I scream and fall to the floor, and I know that, and they were literally calling to check up on me because they know I'm having a
Yeah.
rough time, so they want my better outcome, but I'm like, I don't know. This is why this podcast is important. I'm like, I don't want my best friend of 30 years to know that I'm crazy or whatever. He knows. Like, who cares? I don't know. Yeah, so I go through the totally, dude, where I'm like, why am I masking up so hard for this person? But also, I wish they would just occasionally text like rooting for you and then not need anything else from
Yeah.
me.
Not
Period.
need some other
Yeah.
confirmation that like, cuz I can tell the thing that is happening is that they love me, so they need to know that I'm okay, and I won't always be able to give them that answer in the ways that they want me to give it to them.
Hmm.
Sometimes that answer is just me nodding while curled up in a ball, and that's all you're going to be able to really get from me at that point.
Or I'll say like, I'm safe. That's like,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm in a range where, yeah, it's okay. You could leave me alone, but I'm not like feeling good. But that's not even the goal at this point. We're not even mustered to that level. Are you honest with people at work? Like in the 2 week interim, because I also have the problem where when it got real bad, people at work would do the stupid fucking thing that we all do and start every meeting by going, "How you doing?" And I'd go like, "Good." And they'd go like, "Are you about to cry?" And I'd go like, "Well, you asked me how I'm doing, so I feel like I gotta say like, not good, man." You know what I mean? And I can't. There was a point where if you have like 8 hours of meetings and you're still expected to maintain, you actually can't. You will reach a point where people notice that you're acting
Yeah.
weird, right? Or how did that go for you?
It definitely noticed towards the end at work. My boss did, and my boss at G4, my like direct supervisor, was maybe one of the most like mentally empathetic dudes to this kind of thing. His wife works in mental health, so he was like
Mm-hmm.
very good at being like, what Vanessa needs is for all of us to fuck off right now, and would do like private check-ins,
Score.
and very much like
Mm-hmm.
I could be honest with him about what was happening to me, and he would play it close to the vest and like choose, like be not choose to share it with anyone. And I can he was very much like an advocate for me. And then after G4, I so I was interviewing for my new job over at Game Grumps,
Mm-hmm.
and they were like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And in the middle of the interview, I just started laughing and I was like, I don't know.
I can't. You don't want the
I
answer to
I
that
was like, I
question.
don't know how to answer where I see myself in 5 years because I'm going through a lot of flux right now and I don't even know what that looks like. And the thing that I'm struggling with is that I'm constantly, and this is the answer I gave them. I was like, I'm constantly either living in the past or like in the what ifs of the future, and I'm not
Jesus.
maintaining a sense of like presence. And so I don't know how to answer that question because I'm just learning how to like be here in the here and now. And I still got that job. Um but I was like I think this isn't going to be like the answer that you like want to hear. I don't really know where I'm going to be in the 5 years, but I know what I want to be doing right now in this moment.
Yeah. And it's this job, hopefully, please.
And it's this thing.
And you nailed it, and that worked. So everyone, please try that. No, except if you're trying to hospitalize yourself, because then you can't say. It's funny because people do experience empathy and social pressure. Most people. So if you're like at the DMV or anywhere like a bakery, and you cry and it's genuine, or like they can see that you're breaking down, people will often make exceptions and be like, you're clearly having a hard day, like take the cookie or
Oh yeah,
whatever.
I've done a lot of
But
public
man,
crying.
you cannot go to the mental health people and say, I'm really desperate. And they go, yeah, that's the baseline of everyone we ever
Yeah.
interact with. So it doesn't really face me. Or like, yeah, you just go on the list. Um, I cursed under my breath there only because, and I wonder if other people in the audience are having this experience, but I don't know, more than any other episode I've done before, I not to appropriate your experience, but we're just like the same
Yeah.
person. It's just, oh, it's weird. It's becoming bizarre. I'm going through like the same thing right now, and all your thoughts are exactly the same as mine. And that's just very interesting to me, because I'd call you like a good friend or a person I really, really love and love
Yeah,
talking to,
same.
but not a best friend where we're like not routinely in each other's lives on a day to day basis. And we're just going through a very similar turbulence. So where I was at is my partner is works in mental welfare and social welfare, and like is like a licensed clinical social worker, and knows very intimately what 5150ing is like, and there's totally, and I gotta say, said it totally has its uses, or there's times where it would be the right decision or applicable. But we ended up just putting me on family watch and then getting to a place where like I can check myself into this place, and now I'm in limbo where I'm waiting for a slot to open up. But it sounds like you actually have received services, right?
Yeah.
At this point?
I got
Okay.
intensive
Tell us
outpatient.
about that.
I got intensive
Yeah.
outpatient. I got DBT, like a DBT program. And then I actually got to like be in an intake facility for a little bit, and all of it was immensely helpful. At I definitely was like a little bit resistant to it at the beginning because certain things can feel very like oversimplified, like, oh, talking about your feelings or like making a list of what you're gonna do tomorrow. But what I didn't realize was after a break that big, you need someone to walk you through things like making a list that says things like drink juice, have water, eat cereal, read 2 pages of book, text one friend,
Be gay, do
be gay,
crime,
do
all the good
crime.
stuff. Yeah.
Um,
The basics that you need to
the
do.
basics that you need to do. Like it was a lot of like them just trying to get me at like the most basic baseline of functioning again. And so at first I had like this initial frustration of like it feels like you're teaching me how to just be a human. Like we're not even doing like any of like that trauma processing stuff. You're just like reteaching me how to be human, and it's because the maintaining part is exhausting, and like the little things that were falling behind were just making me feel worse, like not being able to wash my fucking hair because I was
Mm,
too emotionally exhausted to even get like a brush through my hair. So like
yeah.
once we like got basic life skills back into rotation,
Back on track.
back
Yeah.
on track, that's when we were like, all right, now we can start working on some of this trauma processing. Now we can start working on some of like the fact that like shame is your constant passenger. And like actually have these intense one-on-one sessions that were like immensely helpful. And then I started doing EMDR while I was in treatment. Um,
I was about to ask. I'm excited for that
yep,
one. So if I sorry, just real quick for people who aren't in the know, IOP intensive outpatient program, they'll usually offer a variety of, and this is one of the things you would research if you were selecting one, uh, different kinds of therapy, and there's so many different kinds of therapy, and they do apply in different ways, and you sort of have to pick the ones that you think, or with guidance, that will be effective to you. We mentioned DBT, that's dialectical behavior therapy, which is, I believe, generally for people who have overwhelmingly strong emotions
yeah,
that sort of make them
which is
dissociate
definitely my
and
jam.
lose control. Me too. Just like it's like a surging tide, and I reach a point where I go, "Oh, the motion's in control now. My body's just gonna do whatever it
Yeah,
does, and I'm just
the
watching."
feeling is now
Um,
factual.
yeah, yeah. And then EMDR, which I'd love Vanessa to explain because it's really dope.
So EMDR, it it was definitely something that like was recommended to me when I was going into it. It's eye movement desensitization rapid therapy
Right.
reprocessing therapy. And base
That's right. I didn't mean to put you on the spot on the acronym. Sorry. I just meant what. Yeah. What's it
it's
like?
specifically to help you process like traumatic memories, and it involves like moving your eyes in specific ways as they like work you through reprocessing like traumatic or intense experiences that might have happened to you. It very much treats your brain like it's like an organ, and it wants to like make that organ do work. Um, and it was something that I didn't realize how much it was going to be that, because like I had a lot of triggers, but I knew what my triggers were. I just didn't know how to like work around them. It was helpful to know like what could trigger like an episode or a flashback, um that this like improper memory storage in my brain was causing. But EMDR kind of helps repair essentially like the mental injury from
Yeah.
memory. Um
It sucks those thetans right out. I, w- I will. It sounds. It's one that makes me seem, or I feel suspicious about it. Just like real medicine
Same.
to the human body, I truly believe this. We're not at the end of discovering, right? Like 100 years from now, some of these techniques will probably turn out to be bullshit, and some will be effective to whatever degree. So EMDR, I'm super like wary of, except that my partner, who I trust so much with this stuff, uses it and really thinks it works and believes in the science and has read much more about it than I ever will. So yeah,
I
it's
had that
like you
suspicion
flick your
too.
eyes in directions. Yeah, well, they talk to
I
you.
had intense suspicions about it because I was like, this feels uh like I'm seeing like a circus hypnotist
Hmm.
who's just like, and then what happened when you were a child? And I was also like a little bit resistant to it in the beginning, and similar to that thing where I'm like trying to like maintain in the present, maintain in the here and now. I have a tendency to respond to things, especially like with men. I have a tendency to respond like I'm experiencing something that happened several years ago. And so it could just be like a normal dude that's asking me what the time is, but my brain is like, you're hurting, you're here to hurt me, you're gonna hurt me, and I'm gonna behave as if you're going to hurt me. Um,
Hmm.
and EMDR kind of helped me process things and be like, no, you're just a guy on the street asking me what time it is. That's where we are. That's where the here and now is, and repair those like connections that my brain is constantly trying to make with trauma and what is currently happening in the here and now.
Yeah, yeah. It's habit. It's mental habits for sure. It's like just because 2 to 5 core people in your life were very X, you can't. let your brain just be lazy and assume everyone is very
Yeah.
X or like whatever it may be that scares you or affects your mental well-being. Yeah. But I totally do the same thing. And that's my greatest fear about, as someone who hasn't begun, any kind of program yet, but is like shopping around and trying to get in, is, I'm, if anything, over therapized, and I introspect constantly. Like you said, I'm never present.
Yeah.
I'm almost always in my head in an abstract world of pure thought, which is something I don't like because it feels like my whole life will rush by, and I'll realize as I'm dying, oh, I just watched it like a movie. I never did anything,
Yeah.
or I didn't even feel it really. I worry about that a lot.
Same. I'm constantly dealing. Oh
and
my
I,
God, same
yeah,
person.
and I super worry that this will just be more of, it sounds like it wasn't for you, and gosh, that's what I want to hear about next. But I'm super worried that I'll go to it and it'll just be 6 weeks of like rest, which is good. But this kind of thing seems to happen with me every 3 to 5 years in like a cycle. And we're looking at like getting married and having kids soon. I really want to kind of change the cycle this time, or break it if I can, or at least alter it. And I'm worried that I'm just going to go and it's just going to be nice and relaxing and the cycle will start over and I won't learn anything new. Because there's also that thing where it's like, the first step is understanding and intellectualizing, but I'm hearing from you, and I completely agree. You can have it fully figured out and intellectualized, like, oh, I know what my triggers are, and I can tell a new therapist, look, I have these problems because this happened to me, and this is what my coping mechanisms are, and they're unhealthy, and they cause these symptoms. But I can't stop. Like, I can't. It's just not in my bones still. It doesn't matter how long I think
Yeah.
about it. I have to somehow practice the skills, and so far haven't figured out how to do that effectively. So did that, yeah, like, I mean, you can't give us the benefit of the therapy, but would you vouch for the process? Or like, I'm sure there's good ones and bad ones, but like, how do you find yourself on the other end of it? Where are you now?
On the other end of it, I absolutely vouch for it. I think I also have a tendency to, like, especially whenever I enter treatment, be like, what if this is just like a nice time where I talk to a nice lady, and then I continue living my life like this, because I can't even approach something that's potentially helpful for me without thinking about what if it isn't. What if I'm
Mm-hmm.
back to uh being so in my goddamn head that I just wake up and ask myself, how did I even get home from work the day before? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and on the other side of it, it's, I'll say this. So the other day, I saw a friend that hadn't seen me since last year, and I can tell that he had been completely aware that it was entirely possible that he could have lost me several times last year.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't been this present in a while, but he hugged me, and he hugged me that kind of like really tight way that you hug someone when you're like afraid that they're going to float away somehow.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the sun was on my face. He was hugging me, and I was feeling those things happening in real time. And I realized that pre all of this treatment, I would have floated past that. It would have just,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't have been in that moment feeling the warmth of the sun on my face and a really tight hug and actually being there in the moment to feel those things. I would have completely gone somewhere else. I would have gone to, oh my God, I can't believe I scared him like that. Or my brain would have gone in a million different directions. I might have not even let him touch me because he's a man and he's
Mm-hmm.
touching me. Um,
Yeah.
and the fact that I was able to just enjoy a loving hug from someone that was happy that I was alive, um, was absolutely the thing that made it all worth it.
It's incredible to me that there are people who it's reversed for. Like, they feel that way most of the
Yeah.
time, and then they only occasionally feel like we do. those
Those
bastards.
lucky,
But
lucky
I
bastards.
will I will say there's something about, or the thirster you are, the better water tastes, and I'm not saying that you should seek out suffering, but I know exactly what you mean, and I can't overstate how powerful it is if you haven't been present for a very long time, like potentially years or months, and you have a fleeting moment of presence. Like, I've had that recently, and I thought I was having an acid flashback, and I'm just looking at the sunlight on a tree,
Yeah.
but I'm actually looking at it, and I haven't done that in 6 months. And you're like, sunlight is crazy. It's like energy vibrating into my eyeballs. The universe is a miracle. And it's just weird that, the human brain works in such a way that 6 hours later you can be like, actually, I'm sad, and I'm so sad that I'm sure that I'll always be this sad. And it would be a reasonable thing to kill myself because I'm not mad at anyone. It's just like, I'm just, I can't handle this amount of suffering. I'm like a terminal patient, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, but 6 hours ago, you were so happy you thought you were on acid. And you're like, yeah, that's what a mood disorder is. But
That's what brain does.
yeah, that's what brain chemical. But those moments are, and I guess you try to build on those moments. I've now, my phone tells me that I've just completed my like 1500th minute of meditation and my 100th straight day of meditating every day without a break, and I still feel nothing. My moments of being present are still quite rare.
Same.
And I have big stickers all over my house that say breathe, and I wear a bracelet that's supposed to remind me to be present, and I just seem to not notice them. but
I have
cool.
such trouble
I'm
being mindful.
glad. That's why it's so important to hear. And life is complex, and there's many layers to it. So like, I recently had the privilege of, over Twitter, just long messages, but like being able to be there for someone on an alcoholism journey and say like, I was you, the person sitting in the first AA meeting thinking, whatever they say, I'm a write-off. I cannot go a day without drinking. That's just a fact of life, and it's just something I accept, and whatever they say, that just doesn't apply to me. And listening to someone say, my life is way better now that I'm sober, and go, well, they're just deluding themselves. Like, that can't be true, but good for them or whatever, but that's not me. And now I'm the guy who's 5 years sober, and I never think about alcohol. And when I do think about it, I actively think like, yeah, man, if I drank, poof, that would make stuff even harder. Imagine if I was drunk, shit would be even harder. So like, I got to the end of the journey, and now I'm the other person. And so I'm really appreciative that you can say from your place in the journey that IOP like had some appreciable effect on you. That's a real light at the end of the tunnel for me. So thank you for that.
Of course.
Did you encounter any parts work? That's the other one I'm interested in. The new one I'm interested in.
Any what?
That's where parts work, because this really resonates with me. That's the one that's based on the idea that your brain is like, a play with like 8 different sort of recurring characters that tend to speak.
Oh, yeah.
Like you have like a few voices you can differentiate that are pretty consistent. And I definitely have that. And they'll do things like, well, now I just want to talk to that part. So like, let yourself be your self-loathing part. Like the stuff that loops in your head, say it out loud now. I want to talk to that part of you and work with that
I
part.
do that with my
And
therapist on a one-on-one.
that's interesting to me. Yeah.
And we kind of personify these different parts and give them names and faces, and she'll ask me like, well, what does this part of your brain feel, or like what input do they have on this situation?
Yeah.
And then additionally it'll be like, she'll have like a nurturing figure, a protective figure, like something that I can like refer back to like get these parts to talk to each other, where it's like, well, what would your nurturing figure say to like this part of your brain? And it was interesting when we were like figuring out what like these different things are, because like my protective figure, I was like, all right, well, that's like a version of my older brother, because he's always been like the most like he's always like protected me from harm. I love my parents, but he's like done a better job of that than.
Yeah, you cast the roles.
Yeah.
Yeah. Jen's protective is Gandalf, which I
Oh,
find
that's so
very
cute. My my nurturing figure and my wisdom figure are the same one, and it's Marmee from Little Women.
Amazing. Yeah. I would think about that so long, and that's such a fun assignment. I want to do parts work, so they'll say, "Okay, now cast your self-loathing voice," and I'm like, maybe John Malkovich. He's kind of an asshole. Like, I love casting shit. Casting stuff.
My
is fun.
self-loathing voice is Will Arnett.
Oh yeah, yeah. I could
It
see
makes
that
it more
for
like
sure.
tolerable.
Oh, you're saying you cast it in a way that you feel is helpful to you.
Yeah.
I was trying to cast it as in the way that would be the most painful.
Right.
Like maybe Roseanne Barr would be a really horrible one to constantly hear for hating you. I don't know. All right, well that's cool.
It's I remember when I was initially starting the work and I was like, mindfulness means I have to be present for everything all the fucking time. This sounds fucking horrible. And every once in a while I'm still there where it's like, the wind is blowing, there's a butterfly, I'm fucking angry. Um,
Yeah.
but at the same time, if I could get that sweet juice that I felt of being briefly present again, I'm it it stuck out to me because of how rare it felt, but if I could get that again, I'm going to keep doing it.
Right, I'm working at it hard. Like I'm now taking time off work, doing, trying to start a program, meditating every day, doing strenuous exercise, which is supposed to help with it, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm up to like one or two moments of being present a week. Man, if I could get that up to like a minute a day, I feel like it would be so nurturing. Like it would revitalize my resilient, like fuel, my resiliency fuel. But yeah, I'm up to like, 8 seconds a week or something with a lot of effort over 3 months. So, don't get discouraged out there. It's a long road, but it's a road we're taking. Like I do think the fact that humans think too much and that we accidentally think that our brain that thinks so much is us is a big mistake that the human brain falls into almost universally. And the fact that if you work at it and try to not do that and just rest in a state of present awareness, life becomes very rich, and that's a pretty rewarding thing to do and work on. That wisdom as being like one of the truths of life, every culture / religion / philosophy eventually arrives at that. Like that is what the Power of Now says, but it's also what Buddhism says, but it's also what Kurt Vonnegut says in like his little witticisms, but like also, Sun Tzu said it in this, like being present. I cannot overstate for the younger listeners out there who might be like, that's just one of the truest things that there is in life. Like everyone agrees that's a good thing to try to do. It's very helpful. Work at that from a young age and with diligence if you can. Do you get the thing where, because my therapist will also ask me to do my nurturing voice, what would your nurturing voice say out loud, or like say something kind, self-talk? I cry every time, dude.
Every time.
I like immediately like, I mean, I guess it's saying that like, you do have a lot of friends and clearly they love you, even if you don't feel it. Like what, it's like immediately that voice just. But then the self-loathing voice, I'm very comfortable just speaking as. I'm like, oh, yeah. No, well, I'm a huge piece of shit, you see. Like, I don't know. That voice is just very confident.
That voice is very confident
taking
and
center
loud.
stage. Yeah.
That voice always knows what it wants to say to me because that's been my constant co-pilot. Like, I know what nurturing says. I know what wisdom says. I know what they all have to say. The one that tells me I'm a piece of shit is just much louder. It sits in the front seat.
Yeah. Shame that I have intellectualized that I don't deserve but still feel like I deserve as my co-pilot would make a good bumper sticker.
Let's put that all the way down the back of my Hyundai Sonata.
Yeah. Or one of those giant shirts that normally say, like, my dad believes in the Second Amendment and I'm his little princess, those shirts. Something like
or
that.
I'm a dumb little piece of shit that ruins everything I touch, like King Midas.
Oh, dude. Okay. Now I want actual, like, self-loathing word for word inner monologues because they're objectively silly.
Oh,
or, not when you're in your right state of mind, you're like, they're not grounded in reality. No one's that much of a piece of shit. But, that on a shirt would, in that style of those like God Bless America shirts, would be very funny to me. Like, I will drink myself to death, and no matter how much I try, drive everyone away. You know, like different size fonts and shit. I am destined to live in an afterlife where I am a gray speck of nothing, feeling only loneliness for eternity.
Honk if you're gonna be
January
trapped
6th.
in a piss-covered room. Like,
Yeah. Honk if you know you will die an insensible, unhoused person, no matter what else you try. Okay, now I'm just spiraling, so let's call it there. Um, I'm like saying this would make a funny shirt, but also is true of me. Oh no, I'm starting to cry while hosting the podcast. Appropriate for the pit. Thank you so much, Vanessa. I just can't, I hope, well, if someone wants to reach out and say, hey, that episode really helped me, thank you so much, where would they find you?
they can find
That's
me
a
on
good thing to
Twitter
ask.
under NESS Guerrero, SNES Guerrero on Instagram. I forgot both these handles while drunk at a bar last night. Just completely forgot. It was nice to be so mentally logged off that
Yeah.
I forgot. And then I produce a show called 10 Minute Power Hour that's out every other Monday on the channel The Grumps. And then I have a new podcast coming out February 4th called Popcorn and Pixels, where we talk about similar stories told versus a ludonarrative story versus a linear story, and how a video game versus a movie might like handle telling a certain kind of story. And I'm hosting that with Emily Rose Jacobson, who I worked with over at G4, and I'm really excited about it.
Wow. So, listeners, just take that as, I think, total proof that, Vanessa's an incredible, brilliant content creator as well. People around you that are kicking ass might be going home and having a very dark, unfortunate
Yeah.
time. And so, if you're doing that and still masking up and acting fine, and no one knows that you feel so alone, just know that you're not alone in your aloneness. A lot of people who seem like they're fine are not fine. And for the people who are totally not fine right at this moment, I just want to say that everything changes. And that's the greatest trick that my mind pulls, tells me, oh no, this depression is the one you'll ride to your grave. And that's the biggest lie. That everything changes. It will get better again, and it will get worse again. And that's just how it goes. Everything just changes. That's about it. I don't like to really plug stuff on this podcast, so I think we'll just stop there. But Vanessa, I love
I
you.
love you.
The listeners are rooting for you, and your best possible outcomes. And I'm so glad that you have a support network and that you're taking the time to do what you need to do mental health wise. And I hope you listeners are doing that as well. All right, I'm now pressing the button, and the elevator that takes us out of the pit to ground level, where we're supposed to pretend that we're fine for everyone else's comfort,
Got a staple on that
has
smile.
been pressed. That's right. All right. Slap on those smiles. We're out.